What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We now have Invest 92L out in the main development region. That's the big news for this morning and the big news for today. It is currently organizing and producing quite a bit of convection as well. So we're going to be talking about that today, as this has the possibility to develop and potentially become a hurricane in the next few days. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and dive right into it right here. Starting off, this is our National Hurricane Center public advisory right here. We now have an 80% chance of development in the next 7 days and a 40% in the next 48 hours. So this has been a pretty decent escalation of things compared to what we've seen previously. So we're going to go ahead and talk about this, and we're going to go ahead and read the discussion and then go over some of the components and the conditions. A tropical wave over the central tropical Atlantic is producing a large area of disorganized showers and thunderstorms. The disturbance will begin to move into a more favorable environment for development in the next couple of days, and a tropical depression is likely to form by the middle to latter part of this week as the system moves west-northwestward at 10 to 15 miles per hour over the central tropical Atlantic. 40% chance in the next 48 hours. Next 7 days, we have an 80% chance once again. So we've seen quite the escalation of things. It's been kind of a gradual escalation over the last few days, because it started off at 0.20, then went to 0.30, then 0.40, then 0.50, 0.60, then 10.70, 20.80, and now things are continuing to go up from here. So this is a pretty interesting situation that we're dealing with, and based on a lot of model support and based on the conditions ahead of it, this actually, unlike Invest 91L, has a really good shot at developing and getting pretty strong very, very quickly. So going to satellite imagery, we'll go ahead actually, and we'll go over to the Central Atlantic just to show you this. I don't want to go to the Invest 92L page of tropical tidbits because that's too close. But as you can see with the satellite imagery, two things you're noticing. First of all, healthy outflow with this. So that's always an indicator of tropical development right there. Healthy outflow is generating with this. Second thing, pretty decent convection firing up right here. You definitely are seeing a little bit of a decrease right now, especially going into the morning. But part of the reason for that is because, well, it's now daytime. Part of it is because it's still organizing. Part of it is it's still developing. But you're also looking at this now, and you're also seeing a pretty good area of rotation right there. Maybe maybe either it's there or it's close to a low-level circulation that's starting to get its act together. Maybe it'll be there by the time you see this video. But ultimately, it is starting to get its act together. It's a pretty healthy tropical wave. Unlike last time, this actually is producing a lot of convection, and that is something, if you are someone that likes to see tropical development, that's definitely something you want to see. But ultimately, it's still disorganized. It's not really consolidated around the center of circulation at this point. We're going to want to watch out for that, but ultimately, that's kind of the latest and greatest on satellite imagery. Looking at water vapor imagery is when things get a bit more interesting right here. And I actually want to go ahead and go to 30 frames just to show you this right here. Yeah, you're definitely in a big moisture pocket right here. It's really consolidating itself in there and establishing itself in there. Based on this convection, if that keeps going on, there's going to be no dry air issues with this. This is producing a lot more convection than I think a lot of people were anticipating right here, and I think that those dry air problems that maybe some of us behind the scenes were maybe looking at, I personally think that those have kind of decreased quite a bit because of this huge surge in convection. Is it disorganized? Yes, but it's bringing more moisture into the atmosphere, and that coupled with the outflow ahead of it will definitely make things a lot easier for this to develop. So that's something that you're going to want to pay attention to moving forward. But ultimately, yeah, you're definitely seeing this consolidate in this moisture pocket. You're also seeing convection ahead of this as well. And as the system continues to move west-northwest or northwest, it's going to be running into this area of convection. This won't really be a hindrance for tropical development or anything. Rather, I think this will actually help it, because what this is doing is it's producing more moisture and it's bringing a more moist environment ahead of it. And that is also a very concerning thing as well, because if you're seeing convection like this, bringing more moisture in what was previously a dry slot over there, that tells you, okay, we're looking at this. We're looking at a more moist environment than expected. That means better conditions than expected. This system has a much better shot at development, maybe earlier on than we were anticipating, but we'll have to pump the brakes on that. I still think we have a few days of organization to go before this system ultimately develops, but once it does, it's going to be a pretty rapid escalation of things based on what I'm seeing with the models, based on what I'm seeing with a few other things as well, and we'll go ahead now and show you some of this. Starting off, here is your European model. We're going to just jump into the models and talk about this because we have quite a lot to discuss. So we'll go ahead and just jump into the models. If the hurricane runs are out, we'll talk about those as well, get a preliminary estimation on those. But ultimately, actually, no. Before we get to the computer models, I do want to go to current storms and go to Invest92L to show you this. Okay, here we go. This is the situation that we have. Current location is 11.9 degrees north. Maximum sustained winds are 25 knots. Minimum central pressure is 1010 millibars, so it has a high pressure for the amount of convection it is producing right here. Based on what I'm seeing with this right here, we do have our intensity guidance over here. It's the earliest intensity guidance we have. The hurricane runs aren't exactly out just yet from what I'm seeing, but still looking at hurricane strength initially with this pretty much intensifying at a very fast pace in the first 36 to 48 hours before leveling off, weakening some, and then strengthening back up. So we're going to want to watch those intensities as well, but we do have a shot at this really starting to get its act together once it develops, so we'll have to watch out for that. Moving forward, the track models, not really that much of a surprise, mainly staying out to sea, although some ensembles do have this going towards land, so we're going to want to pay attention to that as well. But here's what we have with the European. Finally, we can go ahead and show you the operational runs, and we can kind of go ahead and dissect them and go, okay, what are all the models going for, and why are we so confident that this time it's going to actually happen? So here's your European run right here. You have the system kind of taking its time to organize. Really doesn't do that much for the next, I'd say, 48 hours or so. It's not until, I'd say, 3 days out when things start to get better, where you have a 1,006 millibar system. That's 66 hours out. With that amount of convection, too, makes things pretty interesting as well. And it's actually going to start off pretty slow with its development, around 1,005, 1,007, 1,006, even 1,008 for the next 5 days or so. But then as you get towards the southwestern Atlantic, once you enter that warmer water and that OHC, that really starts to take off. You get to a hurricane strength by about 6 days out. And then you get up to a strong system as it starts to make that turn to the north. Major hurricane strength is possible by the time we get to September 23rd. Right here, and then as it moves out to sea, it's going to remain a pretty strong low pressure system, and that's pretty much what we have going on for that. This system may not do that much in terms of land impact, but the power associated with it is definitely something I am very concerned about, because let's say the system moves into better conditions, we're looking at a potential major hurricane and looking at potential ace maker right here. And just because you don't have direct land impacts doesn't mean you're not going to see surf, doesn't mean you're going to not see winds, maybe a little bit of rain on the side, doesn't mean you're not going to see rip currents, especially on the U.S. coast, as well as the system starts to travel out to sea. So you're definitely going to want to watch out for this, at least in terms of the more synoptic conditions as well. So that's something to pay attention to with the European. I also want to check the conditions as well before I move on to the other models as well, because looking at this, I want to look at the wind shear and I want to look at the dry air aspect of it. Wind shear, yeah, there is some to the north of it right now. But ultimately, what that's kind of doing, the kind of pattern I'm looking at with this is basically with that outflow and this being south of the shear, that shear is going to catch onto the outflow and maybe help consolidate the system a bit more. It's going to take its time to organize, but you do have some shear that this will potentially run into for the next few days or so. And interestingly, the system is expected to hold together for quite some time until that wind shear subsides, which will be by around September 20th. And then as it moves into the southwestern Atlantic, because the shear starts moving at an angle instead of what we saw previously. It's going to start intensifying pretty quickly from there. Also, I do believe it's going to potentially use some of this jet over here, this ridge right here, to really help turn up and really help the system breathe and organize thanks to the outflow that this will generate. So that's also a concern that we're watching right here, and that'll be a big concern to see if this system becomes a very strong storm or not, because those trough angles, those wind vector angles are definitely something you're going to want to watch and something to pay attention to right there. In terms of the moisture is a kind of not really that big of an issue from what I've seen. Yeah, there might be a little bit of dry air that kind of penetrates it early on because of the wind shear, but the convection is expected to continue to hold on, and it's expected to continue to consolidate. And then, as you see, by September 19th, this has a new moisture pocket, and it generates enough convection, and it generates enough organization to really get its act together, and then starts to fight this dry air out and kind of mix it out by the end of by the 21st, and then that's when things start to really take off and intensify right here, especially as that wind shear subsides. And because of the amount of convection we have already, I would not be surprised if this dry air that potentially penetrates it gets mixed out pretty easily, because based on what I'm seeing early on, this is mixable dry air that we're looking at right here. And what I mean by mixable dry air is this isn't dry air that's going to completely choke the system out. It's dry air that, yes, is dry, but it's not dry enough to really kill the system and can be mixed out pretty easily if you generate enough convection for it. That's kind of the process of mixing it out. So I hope that makes it a little bit more clear, and I hope I explained myself a little bit more with that. So that's your European model right there, the basics of that. I'm also going to go ahead and show the AI model, because just for my own curiosity, I want to see if the AI is holding or not, just for my own sake. Yes, it is actually. The AI model does have the system developing pretty discreetly as well, pretty interestingly as well. And then similarly, what I do find is interesting is the AI model kind of doesn't drops off, makes it an open wave for a little bit, but then starts to reorganize further up to the north as it turns out to sea. AI model is definitely good in terms of tagging initial development, but in terms of the intensity, it's not as good, mainly because of the resolution it's running on. It's not running on your basic resolution where it's like the European, where it's like where it's, I'm pretty sure it's like a 21 kilometer or something like that. The AI run, I'll have to check the resolution on it, but ultimately it does have a good job of it at least developing for right now. So that's something to pay attention to. Looking at the GFS as well, here's your situation. GFS has the system organizing, developing. GFS actually wants this as a tropical storm pretty early on before it runs into some wind shear and kind of slows down. But then it starts to intensify by September 20th and get its act together and really starts to turn up to potentially a Category 3 hurricane, similar to the European, although it is further out to the east. And then it just generally moves out to sea from there. So that's something that you're going to want to pay attention to as well. The next, we'll go ahead and show you the Canadian run. Here's the Canadian, having the system organizing up to tropical storm strength pretty early on, actually, having the system moving through up to 1,000 millibars by September 20th, and then intensifying into a hurricane at that point, and then kind of moving out to sea from there. And then lastly, we'll go ahead and show you the Icon run. The 12Z is coming in right now, but here is what we have for you at the 0Z run. Icon's definitely having the system organizing pretty quickly. Similarly as well, runs into some wind shear as well before it starts to potentially get its act together and organize. Icon also has something developing further to the east as well, off the MDR as well. We'll have to pay attention to that, but ultimately all the models are green-lighting the system to get its act together, and based on what we see over the next 48 hours, we'll determine how the system develops, how strong this potentially may get, and how quickly could things escalate. So those are all things that we're going to have to pay attention to here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. But also, I do want to talk a little bit more about some of the conditions this system will be going into. We talked about the wind shear. We talked about the dry air. Now I want to really hone in onto the water temperatures and the ocean heat content to kind of close this video out. Starting off with your SSTs right here, where this system is currently at, just to check those coordinates. Okay, didn't mean to do that. Check those coordinates once again. As you can see right here, we're at 11.9 north, 38.3 west. at this point. This is where we're roughly at right about here. I would say you're looking at your water temperature around 28, close to that 29 degrees Celsius area right there. So that's kind of what we're seeing. We're seeing the system take full advantage of those very warm waters right here. And as it continues to move towards the northwest right here, yeah, you're going to run into some 29 degrees Celsius waters, but it's mainly going to stay 28, 29 for quite some time. And if it moves far enough to the west, you could definitely see this system, especially if the European holds, this system moving into a very large area of 29 degrees Celsius, which is about 84 degrees Fahrenheit for those of you living in the United States. And it'll, from then on out, based on what we're seeing, it could definitely start to really ramp up in intensity right here based on what I'm seeing just with this SST chart alone. And I think that's why the Europeans also indicating that, hey, this system could intensify very quickly based on just these water temperatures alone. Also, the shear backs off and the dry air backs off as well. Kind of the perfect combination for an intensifying system right there, especially out in the tropics. So that's what you have with your water temperature. Let's go ahead and take a look at your ocean heat content. Pulling up the latest OHC map. For those of you who do not know, OHC is basically the measurement of how hot your water is and how deep down it ultimately goes. What's the depth of that warm water and how hot is that water in the first place? So looking at your ocean heat content right now, where the system's currently at is in about 25 to 50 OHC, so not really too bad at this current point in time. However, as it moves further to the northwest, you start moving into 75. You start moving into 100 OHC. You start moving into a lot better conditions for this. That's going to really increase your convection outtake with this. And then as this moves further to the west into some areas closer towards the Antilles, you're looking at up to 125 OHC. That's why the Europeans also wanting the system to intensify very quickly. Similar with the GFS as well. They're both wanting the system to really ramp up in intensity, and we really want to pay attention to how that ultimately plays out, because if this moves into these good conditions, we could see a perfect combination of intensification, like I have said previously. And based on what we're seeing with satellite imagery right now, we're already off to a pretty good start with all given all the considerations right here. Yes, you have some outflow right here. That's going to help the system breathe and consolidate. You have some storms in front of it. That's not really what I'm worried about. I'm more so worried about the fact that this is going to produce more moisture in the long run. And I don't think, actually, I want to check the, I want to go ahead and check 120 frames out back from this. Yeah, I don't think the models at 0Z were anticipating this, actually. Just as 0Z was starting, you did see a little bit of convection, but I don't think these models were taking into consideration all this blowing up in the middle of the night right here and moistening up the atmosphere. So I think, at least with that, I think some of the dry air aspects that the 0Z was battling, I don't think we're going to see that anymore when we see the 12Z runs and the 0Z runs for tomorrow, because we were not expecting this convection to blow up right here and moisten up the atmosphere ahead of it. That's going to make development in those dry air issues a lot less problematic in the long run. So that's kind of one area that you can cancel out of development. The only thing I'd really be concerned about is the wind shear. But I wouldn't even be too worried about that as long as it stays to the south of it and doesn't run into it too much. And even still, I just still think tropical development is actually, based on what I'm seeing with these models and based on what I'm seeing with the conditions on the ground, expected sooner rather than later. And I think once we get that wind shear to subside, this will really start to take off, especially as it heads towards the southwest Atlantic. And that's something you're going to want to pay attention to here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. Now, in terms of what else we're going to do in terms of streaming and all that stuff, here's the thing. I work until 11 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 p.m. Central Time, Monday through Thursday this week. So unless you want a very late night stream, comment down below if you want for me to do that. I would definitely take that into consideration. I'm not going to be available to do it unless it's like a very late night stream that you guys really want. But comment down below if you guys would really be up for it, staying up extremely late to do this, because if you guys show up, I'd definitely be down to do it. But if you guys are like, don't worry about it, Patrick, then I won't. But let me know what you think about it down below, and I'll keep you updated on that here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and close the video out right here. I really hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. If you'd like to help out, hang out, or ask us questions, feel free to join the Storms United Discord server. The link to that is in the end screen. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.